So I know about an itch that you've probably had for years that you haven't been able to scratch, and you may not have even had a name for it. Let's talk about it. In your organization, there is something called organizational capacity that you may not have ever actually phrased that way. Organizational capacity are all those invisible things that are incredibly present and irritating when they don't work. They are things like coordination, decision rights, prioritization, funding fluidity, right? All of the things that actually make your organization work, and when they are not present or when they do not work properly, they are chaos causing. As a matter of fact, much of my career, I have actually had organizations and their leaders call me in to talk about these exact same issues as equity issues, and oftentimes attributed to poor management or even toxic organizational culture. Now, there are such things as poor managerial behaviors. There are such things as toxic cultures. There are such things as equity issues. But organizational capacity also presents itself, or poorly functioning or absence of organizational capacity also presents itself and or contributes to some of the experiences that people feel that result in them feeling like they aren't valued, like they have a chaotic work environment, like their managers aren't showing up in a way that allows them to feel the kind of certainty, safety that is ideal in an organizational setting. So let's talk about what this looks like. Imagine that you and your family want to take a trip to Niagara Falls, right? So imagine that you have a family and little ones, and you're excited about taking maybe a road trip to Niagara Falls. Let's just make it kind of a fun, nostalgic experience, something that I personally have experienced. I'll just share that visual. And when you're describing this experience to your young children, you're describing Niagara Falls, and you're describing the waterfalls and how majestic and the grandeur. You're describing kind of fun little ideas that you had maybe from your childhood of the people in the barrels. You're describing all the fun little entertaining things that are going to happen when you're there. That's the destination, right? And oftentimes in organizations, especially organizations where there's a lot of change happening, as leaders, what we do is we focus on telling the story of where we're going. We tell the story of the destination. We get each other and our organization, our colleagues excited, and our stakeholders excited about Niagara Falls. And so what we try to do, and what we spend a lot of time doing, is painting a clearer picture of Niagara Falls. And then we talk about Niagara Falls as this place that's going to be so incredibly fun when we get there. And let me tell you all of the things that we will do when we get there. And then we start finding ways to help people understand all of the ways in which Niagara Falls will fit a specific need that they have, something that will be fun or enjoyable for them, for their preferences. And all of our attention is on the destination, right? That is what we oftentimes do in our messaging. And the goal is to keep people's attention and motivation anchored to the North Star, anchored to the strategy. By the way, that's a great idea. We definitely want people to understand where we're going. We want clarity. We want directional force, right? Understanding where we're going and being able to describe it as something that people can actually bring into their mind's eye is a good idea. It is helpful for people to know where we're going, and also for people to understand how it is that they will experience where we're going. And the path to get there also is something that we need to take into consideration. And it is particularly important in this case for the parents, right? So if I am driving, as much as I want to get my children and or my family excited about Niagara Falls and the experience that we have when we are there, I also have an additional responsibility associated with the actual journey. The journey will involve me making sure, if this is a road trip, that my car has had a tune-up, right? That my tires have been checked, that I have, I know where the gas stations are, that my GPS is, appropriately kind of thinking about what is the most efficient route. If we need to stop over in a hotel, where is that going to be? And have I thought that through? Those are the enabling capabilities that allow us to get from where we are to where we are supposed to be. Those are things that I describe as organizational capacity, right? The things that actually allow us to get through the change, through the journey. Oftentimes in our organizations, our leaders are very focused on where we are trying to go, and our individual contributors and our managers have a lot of pressure for clarifying the destination and for helping to reassure people that they will have a place in this new destination. And so the messaging is very heavily focused on where we are going. In an uncertain environment, that's a lot of work. There's so much uncertainty in our environment that just being able to articulate a clear vision about where we are going is a heavy lift all by itself. So I'm not taking away from the fact that that's where leaders' energy and focus is. That is a heavy lift, right? And also then to the messaging in the organization to help people feel not only do they understand where we're going, but also can they see themselves in it so that people stay motivated, so that people feel a sense of safety, that they are not going to be left behind, that they will be able to develop the skills to get there. All of those areas of messaging are incredibly important, but that's where a vast majority of the energy goes. Meanwhile, the actual process of experiencing now and getting to where we are going also has all of these other things that are called organizational capacity, or the enabling infrastructure that allows us to get from here to there, that are often not either named or dealt with in such a way that they enable us to most efficiently get from here to where we want to be. Because they're kind of nebulous, they're always present, but they don't exactly live in a particular system, right? We don't describe them as a particular system in and of themselves. So it's not only communications, it's not only HR, it's not only training and development, right? It's how all of those things are experienced, but it's also how it shows up when it's time to think about coordination, right? Coordination is, to what extent does our organization have the ability, right? The actual ability for people across divisions to be able to work together efficiently and effectively, right? And actually it's enabled because our systems and our structures allow for that flow of work to happen well. Now, I know this sounds like people and systems. That's not at all what we are talking about, because a lot of time has also gone into the notion of really dissecting, is it a people's issue or is it a systems issue? This is neither. This is not, oh, the system is broken, the system needs to be overhauled. There are definitely some systems that need to be updated. No question about that, especially in this ever-changing world. This is all of the stuff in between that allows for people and systems to be able to work together most effectively. So this is the connective tissue between people and systems that allow for them to be able to work together effectively. Decision rights, right? I cannot tell you the number of times that I hear people talk about decision rights in organizations. Let me give you an example of how it shows up. Trust. I was with an executive team not long ago, and we had the conversation that comes up in every executive team meeting I've ever been in, and it's how do we actually build and nurture more trust on our team? Not because trust was broken, because it's always something that we want to pay attention to and we always want more of it. And one of the members of this executive team was talking about kind of legacy trust issues that the organization had, talking about how much progress they had made related to trust, but then talking about some of the ways in which trust still showed up in the organization related to decision rights, and gave the example of a colleague to colleague email, that absolutely can and should happen between two vice presidents. At the vice president level, both of them had the ability to make a decision and the right, the titular right within their organization to make a decision. But while this person sent an email to this person also copied 10 other people, right? So decision rights is not just who formally has the right to make a decision, but it's also how is it that those rights show up in an organization in a way that allows for colleagues to trust each other, for people, once a decision has been made, to let go and allow for that decision to move forward, and also for decisions to sit at the most appropriate place in the organization, for agility to be able to take place and trust to be able to be nurtured on an ongoing basis, right? Resource fluidity is another example of organizational capacity. Organizations are constantly changing. When I started my work 30 years ago, I talked a lot about organizational change, and I referenced models like William Bridges, and I talked a lot about change as moving from one state to another state. And those models really made a lot of sense. By the way, I still love William Bridges if you haven't spent any time with his transitions model. But we are not moving from one state to another state ever again. That's not where we are, right? We are always in the state of becoming. Our organizations are constantly changing. I can't think of a time in the last 10 years where we haven't constantly been in the midst of change, whether or not you were intentionally changing. So for you, if you're an organizational leader, if you're a manager, if you're an entrepreneur, you tell me the last time in the last 10 years, whether or not you intentionally said, we are going to initiate or be part of a change process where you weren't in the midst of change. Doesn't exist, right? And by the way, it will not. We are not in the midst of or going to ever kind of go from this state to that state ever again. We are constantly becoming. If that is the case, and I argue that it is, then we also need resource fluidity. We need our resources in our organizations to be able to travel from one part of the organization to another part of the organization in a way that allows for us to be able to move the organization in a way that is responsive to our ever-changing, not only environment, but also to systems and structures that must need to change in order for us to allow to still accomplish our mission and make sure that we're hitting our goals, right? And so resource fluidity is not just financial, it's also human, it's also skills, right? And so that ability to be agile is not something that is just about moving things around on a spreadsheet. It's also about mindset. It's also about the structure that allows for either teams and or systems to move in a way that allows for our organizations to constantly think about what is the most relevant and optimized way of organizing ourselves right now in order to accomplish what we need to accomplish for our mission and for our strategy. So now that I've shared a couple of examples of organizational capacity, I am hoping that this phrase is familiar to you. Capacity in organizations, it's not new. We've been talking about building and nurturing capacity in organizations for 30 plus years. This is not new language. The way that I approach it, though, is different. So I have developed a survey that allows you to be able to just reflect on organizational capacity in your organization. The survey is just 12 questions, and it is industry agnostic. It allows you to think about organizational capacity at two different levels. One is at the level of organization, the kinds of things that I just described, right? Coordination, prioritization, decision rights, resource fluidity, etc. And the other is 5 attributes that I describe as human capacities. And those human capacities, also things that were developed by me, allow us to be able to think about what are some of the things that are absolutely required of the humans who are navigating change in our organizations. You, me, our managers, our leaders, our individual contributors, and give language to them, but also think about developmentally when it is time for us to think about the kinds of skills that we want to invest in building. How is it that we can articulate either the language and or the maturity ladder that allows us to think intentionally about building capacity in our organization? So if you take the sounding, which is the free instrument that I've shared here, and a sounding is a little instrument that allows you to drop it in the water and see how much capacity you have. It will allow you to get an immediate reading on how much capacity you have based on your perception in your organization. And you will have that immediate reading, which also will give you language that describes each of the capacities. And that language hopefully will be something that you can take back to your organization and maybe start introducing some of that language to your colleagues, right? As we start talking about things like coordination, prioritization, decision rights, some of that language could be incredibly helpful as you start talking with your teams, with your colleagues as managers, and start saying, what would it look like if we started doing this more intentionally? What would it look like if we started prioritizing how it is that we coordinate? What would it look like if we started having explicit discussions about prioritization or decision rights in our organization? So it allows you, this free instrument also allows you to introduce hopefully helpful language to your colleagues and in your organization and with your teams. And if you're interested in going one step further, we can bring the Sounding Plus instrument to your organization. The Sounding Plus is different than the Sounding because it's not perception-based, it's evidence-based. And it's an instrument that you can bring to your organization that allows for you to get an evidence-based picture that is not just about the 12 characteristics that I just described, but it also measures functional capabilities in your organization. So that then you start having a snapshot and a really clear understanding of how much capacity you have around your industry-specific 8 capacities, your 7 organizational capacities, and your 5 human capacities, all of them evidence-based because of the instrument and also interviews that allow for you then to make really solid strategic choices about where you are in your organization and also then where it is that you would like to go next. That kind of reading is incredibly helpful, especially now, and also as leaders are oftentimes trying to figure out how is it that we make informed decisions about where to go next. You start with, where are we now? Start with a clear understanding, as comprehensive as possible, as evidence-based as possible about where are we now, right? That allows you to then have a conversation transparently, informed by, engaging with the rest of your organization, that then allows you to make decisions about where it is that you want to make strategic investments going next. Okay, enjoy the sounding. Please feel free to insert additional areas where you have ideas about things that we should ask about next. The State of Organizational Capacity Report is going to be published in October. So all of your input, aggregated, of course, for anonymity, is going to be shared. So as a person who completes the sounding, you will be one of the first who receives the report. It will also be something that is helpful for you to be able to think about where it is that your answers fit alongside all of the answers of other people who have completed the exact same report, and maybe open up some additional conversations and potentially some strategy work in your organization. And also the opportunity then is for you to be able to give us feedback that allows us to keep perfecting, and also for us to keep adding on potential areas that would be helpful for you to learn more about or for you to have additional measurement about. Thank you, and enjoy the instrument. I look forward to hearing from you and working with you.